Hey, what's up YouTube? This is Youthman here. If you're into home theater, home audio, or video, this is the place to be. Consider subscribing to this channel. Also, don't forget to hit that bell notification so that you'll be aware of the next video when it drops. Today we're in the home theater setting up the Klipsch RF7 version 3s, as well as the matching center channel, the RC64 version 3. We'll be walking through the room correction software called Audyssey X32, which is built into my Onkyo TX-NR5008 receiver. In this video, we'll be going through the setup menu, how to run Audyssey, where to position your mics, as well as the different settings once we get into Audyssey and after it calibrates. So with that said, let's get started. Okay, the first thing we need to do is remove the Audyssey microphone. This microphone has a long cable, so you can stretch it around your room. It basically has a base down here that we're going to screw in this mounting plate from my tripod. Okay, next we're going to mount the Audyssey Calibration Mic to the tripod. So it just slides on there, tighten it down. So now we go over to our receiver, which is my Onkyo TX-NR5008. Open up the front panel and it reveals this setup mic. So we're going to plug in our microphone to the setup mic. If you look at this diagram, this is the suggested positions that you set your microphone. Now each room correction software has a different amount of positions that it supports. My Onkyo has the Audyssey version XT32. I believe it supports up to 8 positions. And so the very first position is going to be in my center seat. So let's go ahead and position the microphone in the primary listening position, which is position number 1. We'll run Audyssey in that position, and then it'll ask us to move it to the next position and so forth until it finishes calibrating. Okay, so I've got my microphone placed in the primary listening position. You'll notice that I have the microphone set at ear level. And you'll also see I chose to put a t-shirt around the tripod. I just added that to prevent any reflections coming off of the tripod. Okay, we're going to go ahead and turn our receiver on. Once the receiver boots up, it'll go into the calibration software. Now while this is loading, one thing I'll recommend to you is make sure that everybody is quiet. I tend to run calibration when my kids aren't here and when my wife isn't here. Make sure your phone is turned to silent or off. You don't want any external noises interfering with the calibration process. So once the software boots up, it's just going to ask us what type of speakers do we have. We have normal speakers, they're not bi-amped or anything. So here we are inside the multi-EQ XT32 auto setup from Audyssey. So we're going to hit the OK to go to the next screen. It's going to ask us to adjust the volume in the receiver using the up and down arrows to 75 dB for my first subwoofer. I have 2 subwoofers set up. Technically I've got 4 subwoofers connected, but it sees 2 outputs. It's looking at the first subwoofer output as well as the second subwoofer output. You'll see that it's measuring 85. When I run Audyssey, it always sets my subs really, really low. And so I bump them up a little bit, so that's why this is registering at 85 dB instead of 75. So we're going to leave it at that, and we're going to hit OK. It's going to do the same thing for the second subwoofer. We know it's already at 85 as well, because I've already pre-calibrated it prior to this. So we'll go to the next screen. So now it tells us to place the microphone at the center of the listening position as well as ear height, which we've already done so. So once I hit next, it's going to begin to send signals and test tones through the various speakers in the room. Audyssey will determine how many speakers you have set up. It'll determine the levels of those speakers, the distances. It's going to take all kinds of measurements throughout your room. So you just need to make sure that you get really quiet, and I would suggest moving away from the microphone so that your body doesn't impede with the sound coming into the microphone. I'm backed off about 6 feet away from the microphone, so I won't interfere with that. And we're going to go ahead and click OK. Okay, so Audyssey just finished with the first listening position. So now what it's asking us to do is move it to position number 2. And if we look back at this diagram, we'll see where we're going to move this to. So I'm going to move it to position 1, run it, position 2, run it, position 3, position 4, all the way until Audyssey says, okay, we've got enough data. And so depending on your receiver will depend on how many positions your receiver supports. So I would just recommend go through all of those and set them to wherever Audyssey suggests that you put those in your room. So I wanted to run through the first one just in real time to show you kind of how long it takes. So I'm going to go through each one of the positions. I won't show it in this video. I'll fast forward the video till we get to the last position and then we'll pick up from there. So as you can see, it took Audyssey quite a while to take all of the information that it collected from the 8 different seating positions and process that data. And on this screen, it just kind of gives you a summary of some of the things that it set up. It noticed I had 2 subwoofers. It set my front crossover to 40 Hertz, center crossover at 50 Hertz, surrounds at 60 Hertz. It noticed I did not have front wide or front height. My surround backs it set to 40 Hertz, and it realized that I had 2 surround back channels. So we're going to go ahead and click OK and save that data. And that's going to store that information into your receiver. Okay, so now that's finished, we're going to go ahead and unplug the microphone. Then we'll go back into some of the settings and tweak those. Alright, now that Audyssey is finished calibrating and setting up, I'm going to come into my Onkyo menu. And we're going to come down to speaker setup. We're going to go down to speaker configuration just to take a look. So it shows we've got 2 subwoofers. Here are the crossover settings that it determined were best for this system in this room. I'm going to leave them just like they are for now. I can always come back into the menu and tweak those, maybe raise the crossover a little bit and send more of the lower frequencies to my subwoofers. But for right now, like I said, we're just going to leave it set up the way it is. 40 Hertz for surround backs, although in my opinion that might be a little low, but that's okay. I'm going to leave it there for now. So those settings are all fine. I'm going to come back to the previous menu. I'm going to come down to speaker distance and just show you these are some of the things that Audyssey measures. It determined that my front left speaker is 8.5 feet from the microphone. The center channel is a little bit closer at 7.5 and the right speaker is at 8.5. Surround right, 7 foot, 8.5, 8.5, 7, and my 2 subwoofers are at 14 feet. Then I'm going to come down to level calibration. Now here's what I typically like to do. After Audyssey runs the level calibration and finishes setting up, I want to go back and check with my analog RadioShack dB meter to make sure that each speaker is the same volume from my listening position. And so when I click level of calibration, it's going to start off sending a sound from the front left speaker. Now I'm going to take my RadioShack meter and point it directly at the left speaker. I'm going to turn the dial to 80 on the RadioShack meter. The volume should be close to 80 decibels, so we're going to start there. So let's go ahead and click enter. And I'm pointing the microphone. I know you can't see right now, but I'm pointing the microphone at the front left speaker. When I click enter, so that's reading between 77 and 78 decibels. Let's switch to the center. Now that one's a little bit lower, so I'm going to bump it up to right there. So negative 8 dB gets me to the same volume as the left speaker. So now I'm going to turn the microphone towards the right speaker and change it to that one. That one's fine. I'm going to point it toward my surround right, back. Now that one's a little low. That's only reading 75 dB, so I need to turn it up a little bit. Okay, so right there is the same decibel as the front three. So now I'm going to go to my surround back. Got to increase that some as well. Okay, right there. I'm going to go to the surround back left. That looks good. Go to surround left. That looks good. Now before I go to the subwoofers, I'm going to go back through them once again just to make sure they're all the same exact level. So see, that's a little low, so I'm going to bump it up just a little bit. That's better. That's actually a little low as well. Okay, now the settings all look correct. I'll turn that off. I typically will go through it a couple of times. Just cycle through each speaker, check your measurements, because sometimes you get a little off, especially reading an analog meter, because basically right now, if I have it set to 80 and it's only registering 70 dB, then it's going to be a -10 on the dB meter. In my case, it was reading a -2, which basically is 80 minus 2, which is 78 decibels. And so I had to go back through and just make sure that all of them were calibrated right at 78 decibels. You just want to make sure that each speaker in your room has the same volume level, because that's going to give you the most immersive sound and the most seamless sound when you have sound that transfers from one speaker to another. I want to go back in now and look at the subwoofers. Here's where it gets a little tricky for me, to be honest with you, because when I go to the subwoofer, remember we were at 78 decibels on all the speakers. When I go to the subwoofer 1, notice how low it's set. It's set at -14.5. And on my dB meter, it's registering, instead of 78 dB, it's registering 70 decibels. No, it's less than that. It's 68 decibels. So right at about 68 decibels. So that, it seems a little low. I did just quickly throw in a demo disc from the Dolby Atmos disc, played a couple of test scenes, and the bass definitely, you could hear it, but it definitely wasn't kind of authoritative like I like it. So I'm going to bump this up just a couple of decibels, maybe 3 or 4 decibels, and see how that runs. Again, this is all preference. Audyssey will get you to a good starting point. Then feel free to go into your settings to begin to tweak to the sound of your liking. Now, you don't want your subwoofers cranked up so much that your ears can pinpoint where they are in the room. You want them to be seamless. You want the low frequencies to blend in with the rest of the speakers. But if you like a little more bottom end, by all means, crank up your subwoofers a little bit. If you like a little bit more forwardness in your center channel, bump that up a little bit. Some people like to turn their surrounds up just a little bit. I don't recommend turning them up too much. It's one of those things that you typically want your speakers to the level that the only time you realize they're not there is if you turn them off. They should never draw attention to themselves, especially subwoofers. So for this, instead of 14.5, I'm just looking at my dB meter. I'm going to put it back on 80, and I'm going to start increasing a little bit. I'm going to try that right there. That's at 76 decibels. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to put that one at the same. And that's the same level there. So I'm going to try that with some demos. And again, throughout the week, I'll probably come back into the menu and recalibrate some of this, adjust my subwoofers to my liking. I may change some of the crossover frequencies. Again, that's based off of preference, but it'll at least give you a good starting point. So let's exit out of this. The equalizer settings, if I come down here, it just lets you know that they are set to Audyssey. So Audyssey will go through and try to EQ the speakers based on what it hears in your room environment. This room is acoustic treated, so those EQ settings are going to be different than, say, if I were to have these same speakers in my living room. You may want to come in and try turning Audyssey off and turning it back on, watching different movies and scenes. Sometimes Audyssey gets it wrong, to be honest with you, and you may not like those settings. So let's go ahead and get out of this menu. Okay, so now that I've got the system calibrated, it's time to kick back in the theater chairs and watch a movie. So what movie am I going to watch first? Thor Ragnarok. I've yet to actually see this. I'm pretty pumped about it. I've heard mixed reviews about the audio quality on it, but this is the Blu-ray version, so I'm going to check that out. I'll share in the next video my thoughts on the actual movie itself, as well as how did the RF7 version 3 and the RC64 version 3 perform for movies. Well guys, that's going to wrap up this video for now. Hope you enjoyed it. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you're new to this channel, hit that subscribe button. And as always, you guys be blessed, and we'll catch you in the next video.